Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 2nd of July 2023. Not a great deal of detail coming out, but I think there has been some movement. It's just not reflected particularly in the maps and the mappers. Claims with regard to the whole front line. This is the Kupiansk-Kreminna to Kreminna or Kreminna front line, as you can see on War Mapper's map there. The ISW, that's my map, giving you the same kind of area. Just to remind you, the blue line represents Andrew Perpetua, pro-Ukrainian mapper. That's his Russian defensive line, and the red line is representing Syriac maps, pro-Russian mappers, defensive lines for the Russians. So two different sides there. When we come to Bakhmut and Adiivka, I have the yellow line of deep state map, but they are 48 hours plus behind the times due to their commitments to operational security, but these other mappers aren't so beholden. However, they don't really show much movement on the front line until we get really down to the south, and even then not too much either. In fact, Syriac maps I don't think it's really updated anything in the last 24 hours. So we're just going to have to try and work out what's gone on. It's not everyone maps all the time. They take days off, and also there are quiet periods. There's also operational security, just trying to work out what's going on. Okay, on the Kupiansk to Kreminna front line, there's all the usual kind of activity claimed around Novosibirsk, Nevska, Dubrova, Serebyanska Forest, Torska. Nothing really to report though. So just to give you an idea of where those places are, Svatvo's here. Northwest of there's Kuzmivka, and there's Novoselivka the other side. There's activity taking place in that area. And then when we come down, Nevska just up there, sort of to the northwest of Kreminna, and then Torska to the west of Kreminna there, and activity in Dubrova, which is a small village in the Serebyansky forest just to the north, and activity in the forest itself. So this is the area where activity is taking place, but it's the usual kind of repelled attacks from various different sides, so on and so forth. We come down past the Siversk front line to the northern area of the Bakhmut salient or sector. We have activity, I believe, around the north here of Vasile. We come to what the ISW has to say. Russian mill bloggers claim that Ukrainian troops advanced from Privilia along the E40 highway and near Klishchivka. So this is to say that here's the E40 highway, there's Privilia, there's advances along there. We've seen that over the last few days. All the mappers have confirmed that the Ukrainians have taken some ground just there. And then as well around Klishchivka, which is now popping to the south, and this town that is under increasing pressure to the south of Bakhmut. To continue with the ISW Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank, they say that the Russian Ministry of Defense and other Russian sources claim that Russian forces repelled Ukrainian attacks near Bakhmut, Vasile, Zalizniansky, Yehidne, Kupiansk. So they are claiming that they've repelled Ukrainian attacks pretty much everywhere, north and south of the town, of the city. Russian sources claimed on the 30th, so it's 2 days ago now, that Ukrainian forces attacked near Rozdalivka, causing Russian forces to retreat about 150 meters. That's Russian sources. And near Zaitsevi and Horlivka, which is south of Bakhmut. So there are varying claims. Right, let's go and look at a few other claims of my sources of my own. Just before we go there, let's just remind ourselves, and I said this in the news piece this morning, we are asking Ukraine, says this is probably from Zaluzhny himself. We're asking Ukraine to fight in a way that we would not. Oh no, it might not be actually. I don't know who the original quote is from, but this is what many analysts have said, and indeed Ukrainians themselves said. We are asking Ukraine to fight in a way that we would not, and to take casualties that we would not. We are expecting quite a lot of Ukraine, whilst forcing them, not necessarily that we're forcing them, the situation forces them to fight with one hand tied behind their back. And actually, we could release that hand. We could provide airframes. We could have done that quicker, so on and so forth. But nonetheless, that's where we're at. Don't expect miracles, I guess, is the point. Russian military correspondents write that the armed forces of Ukraine broke through the first line of defense and entered the outskirts of Bakhmut. So there are varying claims that actually there is fighting in Bakhmut. If we come to zoom in to Bakhmut, The town is under Russian control, as according to all the Ukrainian mappers. There was some activity in there, I think, when Ukraine initially did a counterattack in the area, and then they've been pushed back because there was some really robust counterattacks from Russia, and the Ukrainians have been sort of outside of Bakhmut. Well, apparently there's fighting inside. Some claims that it could fall or it could be liberated within the day, type thing. I don't know. The tough fighting in Bakhmut, and also gains around Klishchivka. The Ukrainians are getting very close to Klishchivka itself. Stormtrooper Osman from the 24th IDAR Battalion, fighting in Bakhmut, said last night heavy fighting was reported near Klishchivka and inside Bakhmut. Ukrainian troops seem to be moving forward. And then this is Emil Kastehelmi giving a bit of an analysis of what's going on around Bakhmut. Some recent developments suggesting that something interesting is happening near Bakhmut. During the last month, Ukraine has continued to slowly push Russian troops out of multiple areas. I wouldn't call this the second battle of Bakhmut yet, but Ukraine is definitely on the offensive. This week, Ukraine finally cleared the last Russian positions from the western side of Donetsk-Donbass Canal. This operation has been ongoing since May, and it's now complete. On top of that, the 3rd Assault Brigade has already been observed to make gains on the eastern side. So this is coming down south in a southeasterly direction along the canal, as well as pushing across by Kurdyivka as well. The next likely direction near the canal could be Kurdyivka and Ozarianivka, where a couple of crossings could be exploited. Liberating these villages and continuing north would help with the offensive in Klishchivka. Advancing west enables further objectives. The situation in Klishchivka is also getting difficult for the Russians. So Klishchivka is this town. If you look at it, in fact, you might see it better on this map, although it hasn't got the contours on that map. Let's go back to this one. You can see the contours, I think, a little better. So the contours here, you can see that Klishchivka sits below a kind of hill, and the Ukrainians are pushing down into Klishchivka from high. There are entrenchments in that area of Klishchivka, just to the west of it, though, that the Ukrainians will have to negotiate themselves. Situation in Klishchivka is also getting difficult for the Russians. It seems that they're only holding on one larger fortification and some smaller positions on the tactically important high ground. If it's lost, the situation in the village quickly becomes unpleasant. Capturing the area around Klishchivka is excellent for future defensive operations. However, it gives only limited benefits from an offensive point of view. The next goal would be the southern road T0513 to Bakhmut, but reaching it wouldn't give any great advantage. Let's go and have a look at where he's talking about with regard to that road. I guess that's this road here coming in. I don't know if it's named anywhere. The one that comes in through Opitny. I don't know if that's the road they're talking about coming in there. But anyway, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's where it's going to be. Right, to go back to what he was saying, it wouldn't give any great advantages either. Liberating the whole city is a bigger issue, and encirclement could be an option, as Ukraine likely doesn't want to try taking the city block by block. Something I've been saying. One of the main problems is that Ukraine must advance deep into the rear, or cut or even seriously threaten Russian logistics. Some Russian sources have reported that Ukraine already has a foothold in the westernmost parts of the city. There is no proof of this yet, but at least shows that the Russians seem to be somewhat alarmed at the situation. A future will tell if the Ukrainians are just trying to gain better defensive positions or actually trying to liberate larger amounts of the ground. At the moment, the latter seems uncertain but possible option. The main focus can switch from south to east. I think that they are trying to fix Russian troops and to trick them. I think fix them is the main objective for their activity there. Zelensky has said that Ukraine wants to show results in the battlefield soon. The offensive in the Bakhmut area can also be a deception where they try to pull more Russian reserves into a certain area. A heavy attack can occur somewhere else. I think that's my idea. Or an idea I think is more plausible. Even though the counteroffensive is slow in the south, Ukraine still has a lot of forces and equipment left. Many scenarios are possible. Yes, absolutely true. So we'll see how that develops in and around Bakhmut. It's also worth noting that they are using HIMARS to strike. These are nighttime HIMARS strikes around Bakhmut in Russian positions. You can see them dropping Um, there you can see the missiles coming down. Three of them hitting positions around Bakhmut. So I don't know if that's hitting equipment, hitting dugouts, uh, but it's, I guess, fairly significant that they are using HIMARS in that way, and that would speak to then following that up with offensive operations in that area, I would think. So that is strike on Russian positions. Don't have any more detail other than it being Russian positions. So anyway, go. That's fairly much that. I mean, the rest of the ISW just talks about all the places around that are being hit and all are being attacked, and it's basically everywhere. We are going to keep an eye today on Klishchivka. I think there's going to be fighting in Klishchivka very, very soon, and we'll see what has happened around Bakivka and see how much progress, if any, the Ukrainians make there. So let's pull out of Bakhmut just to let you know that JR, thanks Jerome, really appreciate that, helping me out with the maps, has put the purple line of the annexed region from 2014. Now, why that is particularly interesting as well is that I think there are certain areas. Actually, I don't know why it doesn't come down to meet down there, but there are certain areas where the Ukrainians have now crossed the annexed lines, which means that they are. You can see that here, for example, they are behind some of the 2014 lines, and I think that's pretty significant. Okay, let's move on to Avdiivka in the ISW. They say not a lot of any great kind of use other than that the normal places are being attacked or seeing repelled attacks. Pervomaisky, Avdiivka itself, Marinka, and Novomykhailivka to the south of Avdiivka. It is interesting that Ukrainian forces have been seen to make gradual advancing towards the outskirts of Krasnohorivka. Heavy fighting continues there. So let's put that on the map. As we come down to Avdiivka, we see that in the north, Krasnohorivka up here, that the Ukrainians are pushing closer and closer. I think Syriac maps and deep state maps are a little bit out of date, and I would agree that it looks like the Ukrainians are pushing closer to Krasnohorivka itself. Other than that, there's no real detail of what is taking place in and around Avdiivka in other parts there. As they've mentioned, Marinka, Novomykhailivka, Novelska, these are the kind of areas that get mentioned a lot. Pobyeda to the south of Marinka, but no territorial exchanges there. Chechens have been hit by drone activity in Marinka, according to the ISW. So it's to show that the Chechens are there, as they're pretty much everywhere. Although, as you may have heard today, it could be that Ramzan Kadyrov has some kind of liver problem and is on his deathbed, lost his voice, so on and so forth. It might or might not be true. Pinch of salt and all that. Right, then we come to the southern Donetsk front line here. Vuhledar, I haven't really heard much about that. Velika Novosilka, not an awful lot of detail about Velika Novosilka. Not an awful lot of detail about pretty much everywhere along the line actually today. And I don't know if that's a weekend or as I say, all the other reasons it could be. There is activity, the Ukrainians are pushing hard all around these places. Staromayorska, there, this is Andrew Perpetua's map. Down from Rivnepil, across from Levadne towards Priyutne, so on and so forth. The ISW says of the area, again, not too much detail about territorial gains, but just, claims from the general staff of Russians unsuccessfully attacking, claims of the Russian MOD, the Ukrainians unsuccessfully attacking. Everyone's really good at repelling everyone else, and that means that the front lines haven't really changed. But I guess that Staromayorsk will be under a lot of sort of threat from multiple angles. I think that was announced the other day, but I don't think that's changed. And then down to Priyutne, this is where the Ukrainians will be attempting to move and to liberate. Let's go and see what Reba has to say. Actually, I've just checked Reba on Telegram, nothing on Twitter, and they didn't post any updates from yesterday. So nothing from pro-Russian source Reba there. So it really is quite a quiet day in terms of trying to find out what is taking place. But it might not, of course, be quiet on the front line. Far from it. Activity just potentially in this place, actually, Novozlatopil. If we go to our Zaporizhia tab. Here, Ukrainian forces hit and destroyed a temporary base of Russian forces that were using a warehouse in Novozlatopil to house several armored vehicles and ammunition. That's according to War Monitor. No other detail about that at the moment, but yeah, some hits there, and it could be that could be a precursor to Ukrainian moves in that area. And just to the west of Drozhnyanka, according to Andrew Perpetua, I think there's activity that Ukraine is pushing there, but nothing else really to report. Then this is the only area where there's some fairly significant mapping changes in favor of Ukraine, although a bit of readjustment to have the Russians in control of Novopokrovka. More definitely, but the Ukrainians have gained both kind of northeast and southwest of there. This is in the Malatok-Kamachka area, near enough to Robotyne. No extra movement in Robotyne as far as I can work out, but gains around here, Ukrainian gains around some of these other places. And yesterday, it was Andrew Perpetua himself saying that Andrei Yermak, who's a spokesperson, I think, or in the team at in the Ukrainian government, is flying a flag tonight. If I had to guess which town might be officially listed as liberated tomorrow, it is Lvivska, considering we have video of Ukrainians getting shelled there. So this is a place that I've mentioned a couple of times, but over the last week, but it seems like, as you can see, the difference between Andrew Perpetua now and Syriac maps there, that Lvivska might well be under Ukrainian hands, that they've liberated that. If the Ukrainians are being shelled there, then you would assume they are there. So that signifies Ukrainian gains, as far as I'm concerned. Syriac maps, as I say, hasn't updated in the last 24 hours, but might reflect that tomorrow. We shall see. And then we have Rebar talking about going back to Pryutne, actually, that's and Staromorsk. So that was actually from early yesterday, but just confirming that the Ukrainians are pressuring Pryutne from 3 different directions, and Staromorsk, that's in the Velika Novosilka salient. That's kind of confirming what I said earlier. So that is it for around the Robotyne area. It's interesting that they are so close to Robotyne. They could well have traversed the first major trench lines in that area, but we're just not hearing any details out from there. Syriac maps admitted that there were some gains for the Ukrainians in that area yesterday. There could well have been continued gains over the last 24 hours. Just we're not hearing about them yet. And then just lastly, we're coming over to the Piatikatki area and towards Vasilivka, as the Ukrainians are trying to get through this sector here, but they are really finding it difficult to overcome the trench lines and whatnot north of Zerebianki and to break out of Piatikatki. We have the claims from ISW of the area that so talk about Robotyne there, but that's yesterday's claims, 1.5 kilometers deep and 6 kilometers wide. I talked about that yesterday. Russian sources claimed that small Ukrainian assault groups attempted to liberate Piatikatki, but were unsuccessful due to Russian artillery fire in the area. I can't see that the Russians have Piatikatki. Russian sources observed that Ukrainian forces are operating small sabotage and reconnaissance groups and are not using many armored vehicles in western Zaporizhia Oblast. They're not using much armored vehicles there, as we've seen that they've changed their tactics somewhat after the initial losses they took in terms of Bradleys and Leopards. I don't think that they are trying to liberate Piatikatki. It's more likely that they're trying to get control over it in a way that it's safe to be there, but it will be hammered by Russian artillery, and I think that's more likely the situation, that they can't safely operate around there because they're getting hit by barrages from Russian artillery. So The other only other thing to mention of the area, the Russian commander of the Vasilivka area, so that's this whole area there. Vasilivka is that town, remember, on the edge of the reservoir, complains about important losses among his troops due to the intense Ukrainian shelling. So they are taking losses in the area, of course. Right, if we now come out again, there's a bit of a paucity of information there. We come out and come down the Dnipro River back to the Antonivsky bridge, where there's still a lot of activity taking place there. Dmitry from War Translated says, despite the encouraging statements by Russian officials, the Antonivsky Bridge foothold is causing a very palpable concern among the Russians. All day yesterday, they discussed the footage of Russian soldiers ending up under a heavy barrage while attempting to moor the Dnipro, small boat on the Dnipro. This was followed by mass calls to find boats all across Russia and bring them in. I mentioned in the news piece this morning that bit of footage was pretty shocking. There's a guy flying sort of 10 meters up in the air or so, and then landing again, and it wasn't very, very pretty to watch. But it was some Russians, being lost on the Dnipro River, and that footage I think was really evocative, and that led to lots of pro-Russian voices calling out for, as he says here, for boats and whatnot. Today, then, Evil Gherkin has, who's previously dismissed the perspectives of such a foothold, came out with a very long post saying Russians are unable to dislodge the Ukrainian defense forces. So he says, what do we have now? A very serious superiority of the enemy in manpower in general, and specifically in all directions chosen for the offensive. The superiority of the enemy command over ours in terms of organizational skills, a saturation of the enemy front with precisely those technical means of warfare that were needed on this front, an almost complete absence of such means at the disposal of our troops. And this means that even a small but strong foothold of the enemy near Oleshki will become a serious threat. And if it cannot be eliminated now, at the moment when the enemy is holding a narrow strip of land near the coast, then when it grows seriously, then its destruction will simply be almost impossible, and vice versa. The enemy will get the opportunity to expand the bridgehead. That is why our command is making significant efforts to eliminate the threat now while it is at the tactical level, but it doesn't work. So he's saying that the Russians are trying really hard to eliminate the foothold that Ukrainians have here. Just this, Andrew Perpetua still has Russians controlling all of this area, the rest of this area being grey zone. So there could be Ukrainian presence in any number of places around the Antonivsky Bridge area. But yeah, the Russians are trying really hard to dislodge the Ukrainians, but without too much success. Heavy battles continue in the area of the bridge, says Natalia Humenyuk. Currently, powerful combat work is underway. The emphasis is on counter-battery fighting because of the peculiarity of being on the Dnipro River. Spokeswoman added that despite the complication of the offensive operations of the Ukrainian armed forces near the Antonivsky Bridge, due to the destruction of the dam, the Ukrainian military is still inflicting significant losses on the Russians in that area. And then Tendar has just said that pro-Russian sources confirm that all attempts to dislodge the Ukrainian troops along the Antonivsky bridgehead have failed. They also admit that the situation is becoming a serious concern. Whether he's just referring to Evil Gherkin there, I don't know, but certainly again something to look out for if we haven't got any more details. Really building on yesterday's claims, the claims are that there are anywhere between 120 and 300 troops there, and although that's a day old, there could be 3 tanks somewhere along this area, but there's been no visual confirmation of that. Just the claims that 3 were ferried over. There are some claims that the Ukrainians actually have more of a foothold along here, along what's seen as a grey zone on my map, and that's kind of reflected by what Tendar has here. As you can see, the whole area of blue control there would indicate that the Ukrainians control all of this land quite successfully, but we shall see. Anyway, thank you for watching. That's today's Frontline update. As I say, not a massive amount of information coming out, but I'll keep you updated if anything significant changes. Anyway, thank you so much for your support. Please like, subscribe, and share. Take care, and I'll try and get you an update extra later. I've got lots of stuff to talk about. It's just family coming around and all that. Normal life exists as well, but I'll try and get that out. Anyway, toodle pips.